Night has fallen, and the moon is a glowing golden orb in the black sky. See how it shines on the dark back roads of America, and on one road in particular. Come with us, and we'll take a walk down the moonlit road, for the night is waiting, and the moon is full.
I'd like to share a story with you that was related to me by two of my best friends, Kathy, who had just had her 14th birthday, and Nan, her sister. They went with their parents over to their grandparents' house near Montgomery, Alabama. Oh, it was a long, hot, boring ride all the way from Atlanta to Montgomery. And when they arrived there, they decided to go out into a cooler place, into the woods to gather the wildflowers, while their mother and father were trying to figure out how to settle the estate. They wandered along, gathering their flowers. There in the middle of a clearing was a small cottage, run down so badly that the shutters would not even close over those windows that didn't have any panes left in them. And the boards that were not on the porch anymore, well, the grass was growing up through it. As they looked, with a sudden burst of enthusiasm, they dashed across the clearing, and as they came close to the house, Kathy cried out, "Is anyone there?" And then she laughed because, of course, there isn't. They went through the half-open door into the first room. And what they saw may have been pretty at one time, but, oh, it was so full of dust and cobwebs, and the stuffing was coming out of all of the cushions. They backed out of that room and went into the next room. And there in the kitchen, they saw on the table a meal, as if someone had just pushed away from that table because the chair was pushed halfway away from the table. With this growing sense of apprehension, the girls felt as if someone was looking at them, and they turned and hurried away in fear. But then their fear gave way to curiosity, because as they came close to the stairs, they had to go up the stairs to see what was there. And when they got up to the top of the stair, they looked on the left, and there was a closed door. Kathy opened the door. "Phew," she said. "Oh, such a smell, coming from a pretty little brass bed that was covered with an old, old quilt that the wild animals had made a bed out of." Quickly they closed that door, and they went across the hall to the other bedroom. And they were astounded when they opened that door and saw a completely clean room. The floors had no dust on them. Instead, there was this nice, clean little rag rug there. And the curtains hung on the windows, all tattered and torn, but clean. And they looked over, and there in the middle of the room was a rocking horse, rocking faster and faster, as if a child had just jumped off. And they watched in fascination as it slowly slowed down and stopped. They stood and looked around the room, and they saw a baby bed with a rocking chair beside it. And against the other wall was an old trunk. And there the girls went over, and they opened the lid, and they looked inside. Kathy reached down and pulled out a letter, and she read it. Oh, it said, "I miss you and our little son so very much. It frightens me to think that I might not be able to come back to be with you." It was from a soldier who was fighting in Virginia. Putting that letter back, then Kathy reached in and she pulled out another letter, and she began to read aloud with it. And then she hushed. And Nan noticed that there were tears streaming down her cheeks. She took the letter and began to read. "My dearest love, our precious son had pneumonia, and because the doctor was away with the troops, there was no one here to save him." Nan put the letter back in the trunk, and as she did this, her hand fell against an old brittle piece of parchment. Very carefully she picked it up so that it wouldn't crumble, and she saw that it was a message that had been sent to that soldier, and it read, "We regret to inform you that your wife has taken her life." as the girls sat there looking at each other through their tears, they felt another presence, a very real presence that was there with them, and they began to hear a soft lullaby, one that they could hear over the humming of the bees. Quickly, they put all the papers back into the trunk and closed the lid and started out the door. And as Nan crossed over beside the closet, she felt something brush against her, and she whirled around, and when she did, she saw to her horror that the rocking chair had begun to rock slowly back and forth. And the lullaby was getting louder. Panicked, the girls dashed down the stairs and out the hall and into the safety of the woods. And then, turning to look back at that little cottage one last time, they saw a little blonde-haired boy watching them from the upstairs window. Terrified, they ran through the woods, falling over the broken sticks and getting all scratched with briars. And when they arrived at the farm, they rushed to tell their father what they had seen. Father listened quietly, and then he said, "Girls, the story is told that when that soldier came back from the war, anguished and grief-stricken, he burned that house to the ground. There is no cottage there. The woods have long since grown back where it stood."